World Series is on right now, as you know, compelling storylines, one of the richest and most high-paid teams versus one of the lowest-paid teams. Lots of different ways you can position this and make it interesting. But the ratings, lowest World Series ratings ever. Why? Is baseball dying? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. Steve Milton, you are the dean of baseball people, at least among this group. Been covering it for a long time and voted for halls of fame and all that other fun stuff. You've been around the game. The ratings, awful. Why? Because the games are compelling.
They are. They're compelling, but they're, it's becoming inside baseball in a new way. I'll try to put it as shortly as, which I never am able to do, but I'll put it this way. Aging population, irrelevance to urban Black America at all levels, little league, everything. The rise of the more culturally attuned NBA and new metrics. The people, the older fans don't like, the new fans don't really cotton on to. Too many homers, walks, strikeouts. Not enough action plays.
Yeah, all right, Rick. What are some of the most popular sports right now on the planet? We would say football of both kinds, and perhaps basketball will be up there. Certainly here in Canada, hockey. What do they all have in common? Fast-paced, action-packed, hard-hitting, drama, big stars. Baseball has a little bit of that in terms of the star quality, but it's too slow. And today's audience, especially the younger generation, wants a little bit more action-packed quality. It's too slow to follow. It's like watching golf on a diamond. They got to speed it up.
But Bubba, golf does great in the ratings, and it's not fast-paced.
Well, it's a totally different expectation because you're talking about a sport that lasts basically 4 rounds. So, you know what? But I think you would challenge anyone that watches golf on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon. There's always about a half an hour nap time somewhere in there while you're watching, though. Let's all be honest here.
Yeah.
You know, but you're right. Baseball has certainly got a concern here. And I think the biggest concern for me when I look at this is I think the playoffs have been outstanding this year. Obviously, we cover it on a professional basis. The games have been great. You've also added more teams, so that should attract more eyes. And your World Series is facing the second biggest market in all of the United States. And yet Big Brother, Dancing with the Stars, and Monday Night Football are regularly outdrawing this sport. Hey,
not The Bachelorette?
Well, The Bachelorette too. I mean, let's open it all up here, guys. Right? So I think Major League Baseball, even though they are making attempts at shortening the game, are certainly whatever the moves have been made are certainly just not attracting the masses out there.
So the question, and I think you're all onto certain points here. I think certainly the timing, the speed, the pace of the game is one of them. And Steve, I think a lesser one, but fair, is the African-American, the Black lack of connection to the game right now. But how do you fix something? Is it even fixable then? Because, I mean, you could put in all kinds of gimmicks, but is that going to chase even more people away, or is that going to draw them in? I think it's the former, because I think if you start tinkering too much, the people who are watching go away.
Well, it took a while to get here. This has been it's been precipitous in the last year. And part of that is, let's not forget, it's related to across the board. There's been some kind of drops in certain kind of numbers. And for instance, let's just take golf for a minute. Why they're doing okay, and I haven't analyzed it fully, but they are attracting first of all, when they came back, nothing else was back, right? So that they got people then. But they're attracting their audience, which their target audience is not target audience, but their main audience is an older demographic generally, but they got all of them. And baseball isn't getting that. They're not getting all of their potential market, which speaks to your point. Don't mess too much with it, because don't lose the people you already have, because some of those people are not there now at the moment. The other thing I'll mention about it is it's on late at night. It's on much later. I mean, NFL gets away with it. The NBA, NHL all tend to be a little early in the bigger markets. And especially if you've got an older market. I mean, first of all, you drove away the kids with 30 years of these games that are on school nights too late, World Series, to see the biggest star. And now you're driving away a generation that's getting older because they're not staying up till 11:30 at night.
But
I think
Steve,
the two teams.
sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, I think the two teams factor into this, and not to say that the Dodgers fans don't follow the Dodgers because they sell out all the time. But the Tampa Bay Rays are one of the, if not the worst drawn teams in the history of humankind. Tropicana Field is a mess, and I know they're playing at Globe Life Field in Texas, and it's a neutral site, and 11,000 fans are in. And funny to note, it's not a sellout. I think the attendance was like 11,388, which was shy of the 11,500 max that they're allowing in. But there are no followers of the Rays. So those fans, those hardcore fans, those 10,000 that show up each and every game are going to tune in. And that's about it. And you have all of Dodger Nation tuning in, and then you have, a few baseball fans here or there. If it was the Yankees and Dodgers, this would be the 180 discussion. Why is this the highest rated World Series of all time? The Rays are dragging this down.
No way.
No way. Yankees, Dodgers.
No, because it doesn't matter. We've had matchups in the past, within the last 5 years that you would think that, Rick, and yet the ratings continue to slide. This is not so much. I mean, the fact that LA, the second biggest market, that should alone carry this sport in terms of the ratings, but it's not enough. And Steve, to your point about the games being too early, well, what are you going to do? You're already offending the Los Angeles market with the games being played right now at basically 8 minutes after 5, right? So that alone is a problem right there. Now maybe they need to move up the game to get a bigger LA audience right now. This game is in trouble because of the length of the game. That's all it is in its sense to me. I have watched 2 9-inning games in these playoffs that have exceeded 4 hours and 15 minutes. Basketball wins this conversation every time. And I know we all love to poke fun at the sport because the last 30 seconds takes 20 minutes to play. But you're in and out of an NBA game in 2 hours and 25 minutes every single time. And that's why baseball's in trouble.
I think there's no doubt, and that's endemic to the way that the game is played. And I was writing something earlier this week that I said what was once their most unique element that separated it brilliantly from every other sport has now become their biggest enemy, which is the lack of a game clock, right? So you might see some stuff happening here. We're seeing it a little bit now with the alleged time in between pitches and all of that kind of thing. I also think, Bob, some of the highlights, because of the style of the game, just look at most of the highlights there. There were guys rounding bases. There were slow motions of swings. There weren't many highlights of fantastic plays because the ball wasn't in play all that much. Comparatively, I don't know what the numbers are, but you don't see those great plays in the hole, that snap double play. The one thing that makes this phrase brilliant about the sport, how it never outgrows its boundary, and that is the definitive thing about baseball is it's still 90 feet to first, right? And
Steve, do you remember that old commercial that was on in the 90s with Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux, the long ball one?
Chicks dig long ball, is that the one?
The long ball.
Yeah.
And you know what? It was a fantastic commercial. And at the time, it was absolutely true. I just wonder if we've become bored of home runs because there's so many of them. On the World Series the other night, I was listening, and I think they said 70. My number could be wrong, but it was like 70% of Tampa's runs in the playoffs had come off of home runs.
They have no base runners. They never have anybody on base.
It's either strike out or hit a home run.
Yep. Yeah. Or maybe you get a walk.
You fix that. I don't know how you fix it. The only way you could possibly maybe fix it and bring some of the other stuff back, because now everything we hear in baseball is launch angle and blah, blah, blah. Move the fences back 70 feet so that it's essentially impossible, 50 feet. So it's almost impossible to hit a home run, and see how that changes the game and puts the game in motion. They'll never do it. But it would at least it would force you now to play. Ichiro is one of the great players in baseball history. He hit not many home runs. He slapped balls all over the place. Tony Gwynn, same place. He put the ball. We don't see that anymore. A guy who's a slap hitter who hits singles and keeps the ball moving, there's not really much of a place for him now.
Yeah, and that's where the action is. You see it just gets through the hole, all those kinds of things. You watch the guy dive for it and just misses his glove, or he makes the play. Maybe they need to dead ball it rather than move the fences back. Maybe they can do what they did subtly with a live ball, which we all know they did, harden the cover, all those kinds of things. Maybe they can dead ball it a little bit and see what doctoring the ball does. But that's still not going to make it much less than, to Bubba's point, which is the main one. Yeah. It's society's situation, and baseball, does it weather it? until it comes around again, I don't know that it ever comes around again. I don't know how we're going to increase our attention spans. They're going to get smaller. They're going to be more divided as time goes on.
Yeah, the timeless aspect of baseball is certainly, that's what makes the game. It can go on forever and ever. Amen. The fact of the matter is, I mean, there's a correlation between things like the Oscars and the Emmy Awards, these award shows that go on for 3, 4, 5 hours, and then the ratings tank because they're just too long. We want a finality to it. The NHL not too long ago went to the shootout because we wanted a finality to the game. It made the game quicker.
Yeah.
Come playoff time, it's a different story. I don't think anybody wants to shoot it in playoffs because that's a unique aspect of playoff hockey. But for baseball, I think analytics have played a part in here too. Too many relief pitchers. The starter has vanished. We saw it in Game 2 of this World Series for the Dodgers. They had no starter. Every pitcher pitched an inning or an inning and a third, and it really slows down the game.
And what's the root of analytics? It was the financial imbalance of baseball, right? So teams like Oakland A's, which didn't have the dough after the great, the Canseco years and McGuire years, had to find ways, and even at the start, at the end, just near the end of that, had to find ways to be competitive. The little picky ways, and you see it in hockey too, and how to smaller markets get these kinds of players. Well, they have to do what they have to do, and it creates expansions created. Fewer, it's reduced the percentage of superstar types of big money teams to the overall, right?
But
so you add more teams.
Guys, I think that works for the sport though, because you just can't have LA, Boston, and New York every single year.
I understand that, but I'm just saying what the root of all this was that if they're, they can't go back and change this, but financial imbalance actually heightens it. It like Tampa Bay had to invent the opener, and the opener has been one of the worst things for baseball. I mean, because now it's put 13 or 15 man pitching staffs. Like, this is insane.
That's an issue because I think Game 2 was despite the fact it was boring. It was boring because LA, who technically really only have 2 starting pitchers, kept bringing in another guy and bringing in another guy. And that means you're going to a commercial break, and not just that's a forced commercial break, an unplanned commercial break for the networks. And again, hence just slows down the game. So again, baseball is its own worst enemy because they find one way to change the game, and then the managers come up with some other funky sort of scheme to lengthen out the game. I would tell you this, that some of the things that baseball have done during this pandemic, this sort of change season, I would say starting games, starting your 10th inning with guys at second base, they're going to have to adopt that. And you're right, this may irritate the baseball purists, but if this game is to survive, it has to take on a completely new model. The actual frame of baseball still works, but there's got to be a whole lot of rule changes. And I know that's going to upset people that have been watching the game for a long time, but there's some serious issues with this game.
Boring. It's interesting you mentioned boring because think of every single sport, and over the years, at one time or another, boring has worked and won championships. The Devils with the trap in hockey, boring, but it worked, and then everyone tried to do it. Baseball would start with the opener. The defense wins championships in the NFL. Don't let anybody score. Win a game 6-3. Boring, but it worked. Here's what I don't understand about baseball. Back a number of years ago, the NHL, and they still do it when they're playing properly, used the AHL as their testing pad. The first ever shootout was in Hamilton. It was brought in, and the Bulldogs were involved in the first shootout.
Yep. 2 referees, all of those things started.
3-on-3 overtime was first played in Hamilton. Why you're not using AAA or AA as a petri dish and throwing in all of the stuff that we're talking about for the pitch clock and the this and the that, and a pitcher has to face 3 guys more. They're trying to do it, but make it into a complete experimental thing and see what works.
They are going to do that, Scott, because of the politics of and economics of what just happened in the game. Major League Baseball has won the battle for minor league baseball. It's why the Vancouver Canadians aren't going to exist next year. They have now taken control of the minor league structure. It used to be a completely different body, and they had an agreement with them. It's now going to be them. They'll have this kind of control, and they better use it for that.
They have to.
Not for nefarious purposes so much as for the purposes you're talking about.
No, you can't experiment this way in the major leagues. I really believe that makes a mockery of things. If
you're right.
And you just bring it in. but you've got an opportunity here to try all kinds of stuff. And, you know, look, I love the tradition of baseball, but sometimes tradition bogs you down and makes you unable to try anything. And that's where you do it. And you know what? It may be a disaster. You know, the first shootout in the AHL history, people may not remember this. There weren't that many people at the game that night. I happened to be. First shootout in AHL history, they had both shooters going at the same time. No, they didn't have both shooters going at the same time, but it was so fast that, like, they put the puck down, the one guy went in, shot, and the second referee had already put the puck at center ice. So the other guy was going the other way. Bill Stirrup, who was still doing the PA at that time, he couldn't even keep up with who was shooting. It was going so fast, and the fans were, it was like a tennis match. You're going like this. And okay, so we tried it and we saw what worked and what didn't, and we refined it in the minors, and then we brought it properly to the NHL. That's what baseball has to do.
You know, well, just a little sidebar here. I think the NHL is going to have to face some serious structural changes at some point. I mean, it's kind of neat now, but you know, it's getting too crowded on that ice. And to show how really great some of these players are, it tells you how great these players are, because they're still creating space when there isn't any. Yeah. But that is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, especially in the bigger games. We saw it again with Dallas. It was reminded me of New Jersey. It reminded me of the Dallas team in a way that won in '99. And they are looking at something they're going to have to do that's very big. They did something once, you know, like 10 or 15 years ago, coming out of the lockout. And it might be something as big as dropping one player off the ice.
Or making the net bigger, or finally making goaltending equipment smaller and enforcing that. Yeah, there's a lot of changes that every sport, I think, can make. Football has done a good job of, you know, moving the extra point kickback, increasing the option to go for two, you know, changing their overtime, which still needs to be tweaked. So at least they're tweaking things.
There'll soon be no kickoffs. There'll soon be no kickoffs, and there'll soon be no punts.
Bubba,
you know,
finish.
guys, I know we're blowing our brains out here trying to figure out what to make, how to make sports bigger here. But Steve, you touched on something here that resonates with me personally, and that is the fact, back to Major League Baseball, is that the great American game has, in terms of its players, and I guess we would be probably looking at about 600 to 700 players in the league, 17%, I believe, is the number, are African Americans, and
probably only 18% are inner city people.
Well, and that is a huge. Again, we're talking about what was called the Great American Game, is now being, quote, I'm going to use this word you very loosely, by quote white and South American, Middle American countries, Central American countries.
Yeah, and there's lots to be said for that. But
that means that audience isn't watching.
Yeah, that means that audience isn't watching. And the theory has always been, or the theory has been put out there recently, that part of the reason baseball has struggled, especially, Steve, with inner city people, is because it is the hardest sport to get to quickly. If you play basketball, you can be in the NBA right away. If you play football, you can be in the NFL right away. Baseball, very few guys make the jump. You're going to have to spend a long time.
But it goes deeper than that. You can't. You need.
Of course, it goes deeper. That's a surface.
Even to play workups, you need 7 or 8 kids to really get you and I to have a little fun when we're 9 years old. In basketball, we need a ball, and you and me, we'll play one-on-one. We'll play horse. We'll play a whole bunch of things.
But stickball has been played in the inner city for thousands of years.
Yep.
But here's the issue.
Yeah.
Your best player in baseball is a boring white guy.
Yeah.
Excuse me by saying that, right?
Yeah.
This is why the NBA wins all the time, because every team has a superstar, and many of them are, I hate to say this, African American, Black African Americans. And that is an issue that Major League Baseball is, I think, struggling with, because Americans, especially Black, cannot identify with whoever the biggest star is on the St. Louis Cardinals.
Well, it's also there's another cultural aspect to that, and I don't know if it's related or not. I'm assuming it is. In the staidness, like we don't allow any sort of in baseball. I mean, look at the bat flips and what a big deal that was. I mean, are you kidding? Take a look at what basketball does after a key dunk in a game. It's fantastic. The place goes crazy. The guy's teammates go crazy. The person against whom he felt humiliated but doesn't call him out the way they do in baseball and try to beat him the next time around and then shun them for the rest of the time. There are too many old, culturally restricted traditions in baseball.
Our time is up. Sadly, we could do this all day. I know that you watching would watch us all day. A 24-hour loop of home games would be just a thing of beauty. However, the guys have touched on something that we're going to pick up next time, and that is ways we could tweak sports to make certain things more exciting. What could we do to fix certain sports, to fix the excitement level? We're going to talk about that next time right here on Home Games Hamilton. Thanks for watching. Subscribe down below. Send us some comments to Twitter. Love to hear from you. We'll talk to you soon.